Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of Extra Time presented by me, Baker Linovic for In Scout Network. And today we've got Colin Chambers as a guest, and I'm very excited to chat with you, Colin, all about your scouting career in football and work with IPSO. So, I'm sure we're going to have a great chat. But how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Everything's going good at IPSO and everything's going well in personal life.
All good to hear, and looking forward to chatting with you again. So, another big thank you for joining me. But we'll go back to the place where we always do start on this series of Extra Time, which is asking our guest about what life was like growing up for them. So, same for you, Colin. How was it for you?
Well, life growing up was rough and ready, to be honest. I went to a basic school called Shadsworth, a bit of a rough school from where I am in Blackburn. And but I wouldn't change it because it's the way you're brought up. You're brought up rough and ready, and you're brought up not to take fools gladly, suffer fools gladly. I think the saying is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've learned a lot from that side of it, going to the school I went to. And, would I change anything? No. Everything was great.
Think everything kind of shapes you, doesn't it, really? All of them, like life
It does.
experiences.
It shapes you into the person you are, whether you go to a posh school, a low school, a mediocre school, doesn't really matter. It shapes you into the person, but you're always going to be who you're going to be. But as you go on your journey of life, you meet people and you meet teachers and stuff, and you take a little bit of everything from them, and then you work your way where you want to go.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I think everything kind of is part of the journey and meant to be. Were you always a football fan from a young age too, then, Colin?
Yes, always a football fan. Always been mad on football, and I had a big family, five brothers, three sisters, and we all had season tickets at Blackburn Rovers. My dad was a big Rovers fan, but when I got to 10, Leeds United were the best team of the country with Billy Bremner and Johnny Giles. So I asked my dad if he'd take me to Ellen Road because I kept seeing him on TV on Match of the Day. And my dad turned around to me and said, I'll tell you what I'll do, son. He said, next time Rovers are away from home and we can't watch them, I'll take you over to Ellen Road. He took me once and they played West Ham and I couldn't change the colours. I fell in love with the game even more because Leeds were like Man City today, Barcelona in the past, Man United in the past, etc.
So Leeds are your team then, really?
Unfortunately, yeah.
No, sometimes that happens. You just see a team, don't you? And they just kind of stick with you, and then it's like them from there on. Because me and my family are Arsenal fans,
Right.
just because of the fact when my dad was a kid, he watched them, and it was like the team with Paul Merson, Alan Smith, that David Platt, that team, and it was just like he just loved what he was watching, and then you just kind of can sometimes fall in love with that, can't you?
Yeah, well, that's how it is. I remember as a kid, I hated Liverpool. And I only hated them because I was jealous because they were brilliant, when they
Yeah.
took over in the 80s and kicked on. And now I'm a grown-up man. I love Liverpool. I love all football. I'm always up for the English teams, but people say you shouldn't support Man United, you shouldn't like them. Listen, I like Man United, I like Liverpool, I like Everton, I like anybody who plays good football. I'm a football connoisseur now. I just love football.
I think that's a good outlook to have. You just love football
Yeah.
rather than going down the route of all these rivalries and everything and hating certain teams.
Yeah, well, I'm big enough now to applaud teams I
Yeah.
would consider as enemies. And now I'm big enough and old enough to just say, hey, well done and clap them. And I know that was good. I think that's the right way to be.
Yeah, I think it is, and respect to you for that because there's a lot of people that can't do that. But no, it sounds like you were a big football fan then. So how did you kind of, how did your career path kind of start then, Colin? Of course, very young, like we say, you were a big football fan, Leeds United fan. Did you ever want to play football, or did you always kind of see yourself outside of the playing areas of the game?
No, I always wanted to be a footballer. Everybody wants to be a footballer. It's the dream job, isn't it? I was no different to anybody else. I'm only small. I'm only 5'7", 5'8". And, when I played football, the pitches weren't the best, the balls were a bit heavier. So I was a bit of a technical player. I was quite good with the ball. I'd class myself like a Bernardo Silva type, that type
Oh
of a
yeah,
player,
yeah.
little small ticky-tacky pass and move player. But what happens in my day, you know, the pitches were muddy, the pitches weren't the best. Physical, big, strong players would bully you, push you over, etc., etc. And in those days, scouts looked for more physicality than football because realistically, the physicality was stronger than the technical side because of the pitches. And, you know, small players would get overlooked a lot.
So, did you have any experience at any academy levels then, or did you just kind of play at a grassroots Sunday league
No,
level?
I played grassroots. I played amateur. I had a little bit of semi-professional, not top, just really low end semi-professional. And that was it really in my football side. And then I got into semi-professional on the coaching side of things.
How did it kind of follow on after that then once you kind of got into that role?
Well, I'll tell you what happened, right? It's a good story, actually. When I was about 35, yeah, there's a house, not a house, there's a football team at the back of my house called Old Blackburnians. And it's only at 200 yards. And I thought to myself, I'll go down there and I'll play football there. So I went down there, and when I saw that they had 5 teams, when they had 5 teams, obviously I know some people. So one thing led to another, and one of the guys said, "Carl, we'll put you in the third team." You know, I said, "Oh, great, that'll be great." Anyway, so I went in the third team. We weren't very good, and we lost a couple of games. And then the manager jacked in. So the manager jacked in. So because I was the oldest player in the team, so everybody looked at me and said, "Will you be the manager?" And I thought to myself, well, why not? I'd love to be a manager. Who wouldn't
Yeah,
want to be a manager? Let's give it a go. So I give it a go, but I didn't realize I'm one of those guys. When I do things, I don't do things by orbs. I do it 100%. You've got to be fully committed in whatever you're going to do. And what I did, I looked at the team and I thought, we're nowhere near good enough. You know, and I don't want to enjoy it in this team. I'm a little ticky-tacky player, like I said, and I need footballers to play around, not just lads who kick the ball anywhere. So I wanted a bit more finesse about the team. So what I did, I had a sheepdog, and I went for walks with my sheepdog, and there's loads of fields at the back of my house, and Old Blackburnians youth team were playing on Sunday, and I was watching them, and I noticed they were a good size, this under 18. So I said to the manager, "Can I take a few of your players? What do they do on Saturdays?" And they said they don't do anything; they just play Sundays. I said, "I tell you what, some of these could play for us into men's football. Do you think they're good enough?" And I'm not a scout; I'm just an ordinary bloke at the time. And I went, "Of course they're good enough, you know." So they said, "Who do you want?" So I picked 5 players. So I picked 5 players, took them to the third team, put them straight in the team. And then I got a bit of a bad reputation because by doing that, we had to drop 5 players from the third team into the fourth team and 5 players from the fourth team into the 15. Can you see what I mean?
also some players kind of sank down because
Yeah, yeah. So then people were pulling their face, going, "Oh, what's he doing? He's upsetting the apple cart. He's upsetting people." No, I'm trying to improve the club, my team, you know, and obviously fetch young kids through, which is the right way to do it. And people, the sacrifices have to be made. So I dropped them. Anyway, everybody were complaining, but when we won the league that season, right? We might have done the double. It's a long time ago now. We did very well. Nobody was slagging me off then. Nobody was saying anything bad then. And then the first team manager went and took, 3 or 4 of the players because he knew they were top players. Right
yeah.
now, what I found there was I'm not a scout. I had an eye for a player. There's a difference between a scout and having an eye for a player. I had an eye for a player. So with the first team manager taking a few of the players, the following season I did it again, and we did the double again. And everything was great, and new kids on the block coming in, everybody's happy. Then I got a phone call from an ex-player I used to play with, and he was the manager at Chorley Football Club.
Oh
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
and Chorley's a big semi-professional club, and a guy was called John Hughes, a really good friend of mine, a really good footballer as well. And Hughes, he phoned me up and he said, "Carl, I've heard you doing great things at All Blacks. I've heard you do some good stuff." I said, "Yeah, I'm doing all right." He said, "Yeah, how do you fancy coming working for us at Chorley?" I
Really?
went, "Oh," I said, "John, what do you want me to do?" "I want you to run the reserves. That's like under 21s, under 23s." I said, yeah, but if I do that, I can't play anymore because I'm not going to be good enough. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm a realist. He said, well, it's up to you. So I'll still let me have a think about it. So I had to think about it. And then I went, do you know what? I'll give it a go. It's a good stepping stone for me. Let's see what it takes. I might like it, I might not. So I went, but when I went to Chorley, this is comical. I took 3 of those kids with me from Old
Yeah.
Blackburnians amateur team, 3 of them. Everybody started slagging us off. Who does he think he is? Jose Mourinho, Arsene Wenger, whatever it was at the time. And again, people slag this off because I'm getting above my station that these players from amateur football are good enough for semi-professional, where they're getting paid £400 or £500 a week. But I didn't care because I'm looking at the player. I'm not looking at the background and where they come from. So I took them. And out of those 3 players, 2 I got in the first team. And the other, all 3 of them played in the reserves, and they were top players. And I built a team in the reserves, and results started to come. And I was doing really well. We were drawing with your Accrington Stanleys and, just getting beat off Morecambe 2-0, where Morecambe were beating everybody 7 and 8-0 because they were the top team at the time. Yeah. But they were a higher standard than Chorley now because they were pushing for the conference and stuff. And Chorley were a little bit lower then. But what happened was the results started to pick up, and then we started to beat teams like Bradford Park Avenue 8-2 and Lancaster City. And we were just thrashing teams. But I did really well. But what I got was a load of good players who'd been released by clubs and want that second chance. And I just put my football knowledge of what the little I've learned together, and it was working. And football's very simple. You don't have to be a brain surgeon. It's just about not putting square pegs in round holes. You've got to get the balance right in every team. And I did that, and we got successful. Anyway, this is the good, funny story of it. So my assistant was a guy called John, and John worked up and down the motorway as a breakdown guy. And he was in Birmingham, and he picked up this guy called Ted Davis. So Ted's got his car on the back of the truck. So they've got a 2-hour drive back up to Blackburn. So John says to Ted, what do you do for a living? And he turned around and he went, I'm a professional football scout. And John went, wow, that's brilliant. I've never met one before. Wow, who do you work for? And Ted said, I'm chief scout for Charlton Athletic. But at the time, but at the time, Charlton was 6th or 8th in the Premier League. They were a bit like a Bournemouth of today, right? A small club, low budget, doing really well. So the first thing John said to Ted was, do you know what? My mate Colin would make a great scout. That's the first thing he said to him. And he said, yeah. So Ted turned around and said, who's Colin? He said, well, Colin's the manager of the reserves and I'm his assistant. Oh, he said, but I don't know how he does it. He gets pub players and makes them semi-pros. Ted said, well, that's just like getting League 3 players or League 4 and putting them in the first division, or the Premier League or whatever it was at the time. I think it was League 1 at the time. Anyway, he said, oh, it sounds interesting. He said, yeah, I don't know how he does it. He's good. So Ted lived 20 minutes, half an hour from Blackburn, a place called Rosendale. So John dropped him off, and he had £1 million house, beautiful, electric gas. So, wow, where's this guy got his money from? Anyway, so John dropped him off, but Ted, being a lovely, nice bloke, turned around to John and said, anytime you pass him, bob in for a coffee. So John did. He bobbed in for a coffee every now and again, because obviously he's on the road, And 2 or 3 months later, Ted said to John, this Colin guy, I've been monitoring him on, because the internet had just come out at the time. Do you know what I mean? I've been monitoring him, and he's doing well in it. He's doing well, and I've been watching his results, and he's getting some good results there for Chorley against these other teams, because at the time we were small compared to these other ones. And he said, we asked him to come round to our house. I'd like to have a chat with him. So John comes running back to me and says, Colin, I think this guy Ted's going to offer you a job. I said, what do you mean he's going to offer me a job? He said, well, he's what you call it. He's asked you to come round. He wants to chat with you. He's been monitoring you. I said, okay, no problem. So we went round to Ted's house. And when we drove up, it were like cribs, MTV, electric gates and everything. £1 million pad. Wow, this guy must be rich, So we went in, and Ted's a really big, tall guy, lovely guy. And he leant over to me and he shook my hand and he said, my name's Ted Davis. I've been a professional football scout for 15 years. I've worked at Middlesbrough. I've worked at Chelsea. as chief scouts and stuff like this, and ordinary scouts. And I've worked my way up, and I'm now the chief scout at Charlton. And I also work for England with Terry Venables. I've worked with Sven, I've worked with Glenn. You know, he's talking about Sven, Goran Eriksson, and Glenn. He was making his mark to show me like he's a somebody, you know, and I've got to listen to him. Right.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. Anyway, next minute, me and Ted started talking. And I didn't know, but he was sort of interviewing me and he's asking me football questions. I'm just talking like I'm talking to you now, and I'm answering these football questions. And 2 hours later, and John sat there playing head tennis like this as me and Ted's talking. 2 hours
Just
later,
watching the conversation.
yeah. 2 hours later, Ted turns around and says, Colin, I'm quite impressed with your knowledge of football. I said, oh, thank you. That's nice, that. He said, listen, I'll cut to the chase. I have a vacancy in Lancashire, and I want you to come and work for us at Charlton in Lancashire. And John's like mesmerized. And me being very, even though I'm a man, I'm very naive at the time, right? And I turned around to Ted and said, well, thanks, Ted, for your offer, but I'm okay where I am. Well, Ted got a little bit offended. What do you mean you're okay where you are? I said, well, I really like my job at Chorley. You know, I like running the reserves. I don't want to go looking at kids 6, 7 years of age, you know, in the academy. And Ted said, you what? He said, I said, I don't want to look at kids at 6 and 7. I'm happy doing the under 21s and 28. I enjoy it. He said, let's just say he used some special words, let's just say, without saying it. And he said, we don't look at 6 and 7-year-old. He got offended. He said, we don't look at 6 and 7-year-old kids. He said, we look at £6 and £7 million players, because that's what it were at the time.
Yeah.
I said, oh, so I've obviously got the wrong end of the stick, because I thought he was going to ask me to go into the academy and as a scout and work my way through. And he went, no. He said, no. He said, you're coming for the first team. I said, I'm not good enough for the first team. And Ted said, I never said you were, son. And I went, oh, so he's putting me in my place. And he said, listen, I can see something in you. I've obviously got an eye for a player. He said, but if you come under my wing, I'll train you. I'll train you to be a professional scout because you got something. I went, oh, okay then. He said, how much money you're on at Chorley? Let's just say you're on 30 quid a week, something like that. He turned around and said, 30, 60, 120 a month. I'll give you 500 to 600 pound a month if you come working for us at Charlton. He says, but the first thing you've got to do is everything you know about football, take it out your head, roll it in a ball, he said, and throw it in that bin. He said, because semi-professional, amateur football, semi-professional, where you've come from, isn't professional. It's not professional. And you picked up a lot of bad habits in your conversation with me. You're saying things that are a bit naive and a bit silly because it's semi-professional. You don't know you're saying it because you think it's right. He said, but to a professional like me, it's miles off. He said, so what we've got to do is take everything you know out of your head and we've got to start fresh. He said, a little bit like Mr. Miyagi and Karate Kid. He said, I'm Mr. Miyagi, you're Karate Kid. And if you let me train you, I'll turn you into a really good scout. And that's how it started.
That's that's absolutely incredible, really. Just I always think one of the best sayings in life is being in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
It's like imagine if Ted was never picked up
Yeah.
um by
It was meant to be.
it's yeah, absolutely. It's like imagine your career if that moment had never have happened.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I talked to Ted, what I didn't realize was Ted wasn't an ordinary scout. Ted was very, very special. I would say he's the best scout I've ever seen, I've ever met, because I know what he was like. We use the motto attention to detail with IPSO. And his attention to detail was another level. Right? He was unbelievable. You know, I remember once we went to a game when he was training me, and he said, right, we're going to do Preston. Preston played Coventry. He said, I want you to do a report on Coventry. I said, okay. So I get my pen and paper out and I'm starting doing notes and I'm watching him next to me. And all he did was write down the shapes of both teams. And I thought, that's a bit odd. So I'm sort of watching him outside of my eye. I'm trying to learn and trying to cheat, if you know what I mean. And I'm trying to do my report. Anyway, Next minute, Ted shaking everybody. He knew everybody, everybody in football. Anybody who was anybody, he was shaking. He was like a messiah of scouting, if you know what I mean. So obviously, I've got a good mentor and I've got someone to look up to. And at the end of the game, I noticed he wrote very little, very little. And I thought, this guy con man, is he conning me? Because he's not writing anything. He can't be a top scout, you know what I mean? Because he's not written anything down. Anyway, we goes home and Ted says, as soon as you can, get your report in and we'll have a look at your report versus my report and we'll see where you're going wrong and where you're going right. I said, yeah, okay, no problem. So I've written my report, took about 3 hours. It's a big opposition analysis report. But don't forget, he showed me the ropes before that. And I did it. And then when I did it, he pulled his report out. Wow, it was unreal. That's another level. I thought mine was all right. I'm not going to say good because I wasn't good. I was just an ordinary scout learning the game. But when I read his, it was like reading the Bible compared to someone telling a story. It was just wow. And he didn't miss a trick, right? And I'm thinking, how did he do that? So I pulled him. I said, how did you do that? He said, well, when you get to my age, you get as experienced as us. It's not about taking notes. It's not about that. It's about remembering things. He said, because if you're taking notes and you've got your head in your book, you're missing off the game. You've got to learn to train your brain to pick up things quickly and memorize things. Yes, do short and take bullet points. He said, but you've got to brain train. I've been doing it that long now. He said, it's all up there. He said, so when I go home, everything's there and I just write it straight away from fresh. If I'm struggling, I'll look at my notes, but I hardly write any notes. I didn't get that at the time. I couldn't comprehend it. But now, when I go to games, it's 24 years I've been in the game now at the highest level. I'm the same. I hardly write any notes because everything sticks. I do write notes because it's important. But as you get more experience, and this isn't any job, forget football. If you're a postman, you start to remember where all the streets are. If you're a taxi driver, you start to remember the routes. Everything starts sticking. Yeah, it's the same with scouting. And that's what we teach on the courses. And this is why when we get people coming on our courses, they're a bit shocked because we're showing them things that other courses don't show because of the depth of the detail, which is very important.
So it's absolutely incredible how that story came together. And I'm so glad that you shared that. And I believe you spent 6 years at Charlton Athletic eventually as a first team scout and opposition analyst in the Premier League.
Yeah, I did. I spent 6 years there, and then I moved on to Bolton, where I spent 7 years at Bolton as a scout and opposition analyst. You must remember there's a big difference between a scout and an opposition analyst. They're both
Yeah.
scouts, but one scouting players, but to do an opposition report is a different level. And and I see too many people at the moment on LinkedIn and Facebook going on to courses on opposition analysis and then doing a report, after 4 hours of training. They're just ridiculous. They're miles off, honestly. They've no understanding of a real opposition report because I know most clubs, well, I know 99.9% of clubs would not accept those students because it takes you years to learn that job. Even, our opposition analysis is level 5. But we wouldn't advise you to just come straight on level 5 because you're not going to get a job after it because you need level 1, 2, 3, 4 because that's going to help you on level 5 because that knowledge is needed to do the opposition reports. And then you've got to go and practice. And then you need to show your reports to someone who can mentor you and tell you where you're going right, where you're going wrong. You're not just going to be overnight be able to do opposition because it's the hardest job in football. It really is. And it's a shame, all this modern technology coming in. People go, you don't need a scout at the game. Trust me, you do. You do need a scout at the game live. I remember working for the club. I'm not going to name names because it's not right. But I was working for the club and the new manager come in and said, no scouts going to games. We're doing everything now from video. We were bottom of the league, the Premier League, at Christmas time. He lost his job, the manager. And as soon as the new manager came in, he decided that all the scouts have to go to matches to do the written report. So you can have the video and the written report. And that's even stronger than just a video report. And we got relegated that season, but it just proves that you needed people live at the game because if you just do, I'm just talking opposition analysis now, if you do opposition analysis from a video, yeah, you're going to get a good, what's the word I'm looking for? amount of information about the opposition, but you're only going to get 70%. Trust me, 70%. You're not going to, you can't hear them. You can't read the body language properly. You can't see the distances between. There's so many things you can't see. The camera follows the ball. You can't see them. So there's 100 things you can't see. That's the other 25%. That will take you to 95% if you get a guy live at the game. Yeah. Now, I'm never going to say 100% because there's too much going on in a game. Nobody can get 100%. Even if you had 3 opposition analysis, you'd still miss something because there's too much going on, from individual players to pairings to units to formations, etc. And formations can change with the click of the fingers. You know, it's multitasking. And to be able to multitask and do that job properly is a massive, not just a big skill, a massive skill, you know, and that's what we teach.
I can imagine that you definitely need a live scout at the games, and you've got a prime example of how that works so much better there. So yeah, of course, you enjoyed a very successful and have enjoyed a very successful spell in the game to this date. Of course, spending 7 years at Bolton in the Premier League and Championship after Charlton. You were at Northern Ireland international team for a little bit. Then went to Poland with Legia Warsaw. Spent a year at Luton, and then more recently Middlesbrough and the Polish national team. So how's your career kind of panned out after that, Colin? And can you tell me some of the highlights of your career within the scouting business?
Highlights, highlights, highlights. Oh, there's hundreds of highlights. Every game's a highlight. Every week's a highlight. I'll explain briefly. Basically, I started at Charlton, like we talked about, and then Ted changed. Ted lost his job because Ian Dowie came in, and Ian Dowie wanted Ted to move to London. Ted wouldn't move to London, so Ted left Charlton. There was a bit of a little bit of a, let's say, a bit of an argument between them. And then Ted went freelance. So I went freelance with Ted, basically working for anybody. But don't forget, Ted's super connected. He's a bit like Dr. No with the cat on his arm. He's one of
Yeah.
them. You know, there's nobody he doesn't know. He knows everybody. And don't forget, Ted worked for England at the time. But then Ted was working for Northern Ireland. Ted was working for Northern Ireland, and Ted got me working for Northern Ireland. Ted had sort of like a chief scouts role, you know, of it, the way he got it going with the manager. And he asked me to go working with him. So I worked with him there. And then I went to Bolton. So I was at Bolton for 7 years as a scout and opposition analyst. And I loved my time at Bolton. Really good, well-run club, great facilities, good team, good everything. I really enjoyed myself. And then I left there. I did a little bit with Legia Warsaw, okay, and Luton Town. And the reasons for that is Luton Town, Bolton went bust. If you can remember,
Yeah.
Bolton went bust. So I had no job. So everybody lost a job. It didn't matter who you are, you lost your job. So I sent my CV out, and within a week, Luton Town came back to me. So Luton Town came back to us, and I went working for them for about 12 months, roughly. And then when I built IPSO with a Polish guy called Kamil Poczkas, that's another long story, but we'll get to that later on. Basically, Kamil was well connected in Poland, and Kamil was working for Legia Warsaw. And he said, we need a scout in England, you know, working for us. So I ended up working for them. So I worked for them. And then this is how it goes in football. You get offered jobs because of people and stuff. And then I got a job at Middlesbrough. I worked at Middlesbrough about 8 years. But IPSO was built then when I was working at Middlesbrough. And I was just coming into designing IPSO and building it. So I said to the chief scout at the time at Borough, because Borough were brilliant with me. I really enjoyed working there. You know, I go away a lot because I deliver courses all over the world with this new company that me and my mates designed called IPSO. And he said, that's okay, no problem. That's good that you go into these countries. You might see players that we've never heard of. I said, yeah, that's good. Yeah. I said, but if we can work it in, like when I go away, I'll scout for you for nothing, as long as, you know, I keep the job at Borough. And I had a right good relationship. And we sort of did that. And it worked. And I worked with him for 8 years. Great relationship, great people. You know, I met some top people there. he worked his way up in life, and he ended up as the assistant manager to the national team. Well, as soon as you got that, it's all about who you know, and you've got to have the ability to back it up. So Camille said to us, "We need you for the World Cup. We've made it to the World Cups." He said, "Will you work for us at the World Cup?" He said, it's very unusual because we're Polish and we don't really want an Englishman working for Poland, but
Yeah.
we know you're very good at your job. And, I don't think there's anyone better at what you do in Poland. So he had a chat with the staff and then the national team manager at Poland. And then I ended up working for Poland. They sent me to Spain to go and talk about highlights. They sent me to Spain to look at Saudi Arabia because they was in our group. So I went to Murcia and in Spain, and Saudi Arabia had a friendly against Ecuador. That was brilliant, by the way, because I don't know where the fans of Ecuador come from, but there were 10,000 Ecuador fans in Spain.
Yeah.
How the hell did they get there? I have no idea. They must be living there. And it was
Yeah.
like it was only a friendly before the World Cup, but it was like you were at the World Cup with the flags and banners. And that was a highlight for me. I really, really enjoyed that day. And then the second game, and I had to do a match report, obviously, on Saudi Arabia. That report takes about 6 hours because it's an attention to detail one. You're talking at international level now, and you can't miss anything. Do you know what I mean? And on the second game, Cheslav, the manager, Cheslav Milosevic, the manager of the national team, came out to have a look at the Americans, and he sat next to me. Quite funny, actually. So Cheslav sat next to me, and I give him a look, and I said, "Ches," I said, "I can't let you sat next to me because you're going to be talking to me all the way through the game. I'm trying to watch and I'm trying to do my job." And he said, "Yeah, I know, Cole, I know." And he got up and he walked 30 yards away and sat somewhere else. So then I could just do my job because you couldn't have people talking to you when you're doing that job. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
I
that
bet
was
it
another.
takes. I bet you need to
So
give your full attention to it.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
had to tell him, said, "Do one." And he knew the script and he did. He just let me do my job. So I did my job on that one. And then just before the World Cup, following week, just before the World Cup started, I'm talking 2 days, Saudi Arabia had a friendly against Croatia in Saudi Arabia. So I get the
Yeah.
phone call, "Can you fly over to Saudi Arabia at the drop of a hat?" Well, I could because that's the way I am with my business. So they put me on a plane. I flew over to Saudi Arabia for 1 day, 1 day or 1.5 days, whatever you want to call it. I watched them play Croatia. And in the first two reports, Saudi Arabia didn't look a good side. All right, they didn't look good, but they were trying all the fringe players, and they were a bit of a mismatch and a misshape, and they were experimenting. Let's just say that. And I thought, well, this is a straightforward win for Poland. No, not when I watched them play Croatia. They put the big guns out. They put the best 11 players out, and they were a
Yeah.
good side. And I went, wow, they got beat by Croatia 1-0. But you know how good Croatia are. They're always there,
Yeah.
thereabouts. And I said to Cheslav and Camille, I said, we've got to be careful with these Saudis. They're a bloody good team. They're a really good side when they get the best 11 out. Anyway, if you go back and look at the World Cup, right,
I know what's coming, I think.
we beat Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia beat the winners. They beat Argentina,
Yeah.
but we beat
In the
them. And that was
first
our only
game,
win.
yeah.
So that's a bit of a pat on the back for myself, if I like.
Yeah.
So that was good. Those are highlights. I remember when I was working for Bolton and I was in Poland as a European scout at the time. And I saw young Robert Lewandowski, who was
Really.
19. And he hardly had a kick. And I talk about this on one of our workshops. But I knew with Ted's training that he was a player. You just know if you need to be trained, and this is the big thing I want to talk about later. There's too many people think they can scout. Just get up and go and scout. That's what a fan does. You know what I mean? A player finishes his career, goes and scouts. He can't scout. He can spot the obvious. He can see a good player because I'm not going to insult his intelligence. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the bigger picture, understanding tactics, shapes, characters, personalities. There's a million things you need to learn in scouting, what people don't realize. So going back to that, I noticed in this game with Lewandowski, remember, he's just a kid. Nobody knew him. He wasn't famous. And I went and I put a really good report into Bolton. I said, we need to follow up on ASAP. We didn't, or we did. I don't know. You know what I mean? And we could have had Robert Lewandowski if we'd have played the cards right. But a better one than that, I remember, these are highlights in my career. I remember going to watch Jamie Vardy playing for Fleetwood. And 99.9% of the time, when you're going to look at a 24-year-old playing in so-called non-league and we're Premier League, it's no chance. But on this occasion, it was different. And this is where your skill comes in and your observation skills come in. I actually, after the first game, went, oh, hang on a minute, something about this kid. He's decent. No, we need to take him serious. So I went to watch him 3 times. On the second viewing, I said, sign him. He's going to be a superstar. He's going to play for England, which is an highlight to my career, and it happened.
Yeah. It's incredible, and I think that Jamie Vardy story, the rise of Jamie Vardy, is one of the best stories in football in terms of his career from where he was, like you say, playing for Fleetwood in
Yeah.
and then to the Premier League winner, FA Cup winner, played for England. It's
Well,
incredible.
Baker, what I've got, right, I remember I saved all my reports, right? And on one of our courses, I think it's the level 4 first team scouting, I show the students the 3 reports that I did for Bolton at the time. And there's a bit of a gap between them. There's a few weeks between each one because obviously we sent other scouts to have a look. And those 3 reports are very different because he improved over time because he'd been going to a higher. He's gone from Halifax up to Fleetwood, so it's a league above. It started at Stocksbridge Port Steels, and then he went up a notch, and he kept going up and up and up. And he's at Fleetwood, and he's getting better coaching. I could see him improving over the space of time, and the report's fascinating. But it's good to show beginner scouts how to do it and how to change from the first thought process to the second
Mm.
thought process, the third thought process. When you're scouting, you're processing a player. A lot of people don't. They go with the gut feeling. They go with their opinions. It's not about opinions. It's about facts. And if you don't get the facts right, your opinion's worthless. And people hate it when I say that to them. I'm not interested in your opinion. I'm interested in the facts of the player because too many people have opinions, and those opinions, 75% of the time, are wrong. 25% they're going to be right, but that's experienced people who know what they're doing. And that's the same in any job. If you're a new scout for me, excuse me, I wouldn't trust you until I got to know you, until I
Yeah.
see what your skill set is and what your knowledge is and your recommendations. Once you've done that, then I'll value your opinion, but that takes time. And I remember working for a few chief scouts, and it's 6 months, 8 months before they value your opinion. And people have to understand that it's not nasty. People aren't being arrogant and shoving you away and thinking they're better than you. They're just being cautious because it's easy to make a mistake in scouting by jumping in with 2 feet or being a bit too cocky and arrogant in your
Yeah.
approach.
I can imagine it's a profession where you've got to be very cautious and take the right approach to
Yeah,
it.
you have. You have. And that's what we do on our courses at IPSO. And the good thing about that is, and this is interesting for you, people think I design most of the courses, with help from other scouts and other performance analysis and things like that in different courses and workshops that we have. But how I designed them is how Ted trained me. It's come from the horse's mouth. It's come from the best. I'm not best in business. I'm a decent scout, I'd like to think. Ted was another level. So you're not learning from me. You're learning from Ted Davies, one of the best in the business. And I put him in scouting like Alex Ferguson in football, as a
Yeah,
manager. You're talking that level, because when you see Ted's report, it made always look Mickey Mouse. You know what I mean? He was just an unbelievable guy and so smart and so wise in the way he looked at things. So how he, let's say, trained me over those years, I put everything into the courses and the workshops. But what we've also done is make sure, because the game's evolved and changed, data, statistics is coming. We've got to keep on top of that. You've got to mix in old school scouting with modern scouting. And blend it right. Everybody say it's all about data and stats. No, it's not. Data and stats is there to help you, not to take over. Not at the moment. When it does, I'll be the first to hold my hand up and say, oh, we need to move on to data and stats. You've got to get that balance between data and stats and the human eye. And I'm not here to slag off data stats because I love them. I think it's brilliant. I think it's great that it's coming to the game. You can now know how fast a player can run from data. You know what I mean? Where as a scout with the human eye, oh, he looks quick, he looks fast, and you can get it more accurate. So there's loads of good things, but there's also loads of bad things that's creeping into the game in the scouting world. I hear these performance analysts and so-called scouts saying, "Oh, it's all done on your mobile phone now." Blah 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 blah. What a load of rubbish! You can't fit everything on that mobile phone. You're missing off the game, and you're not there to watch one player. You're there to watch 22 players because there's always another player that might have improved. Players improve every week, but also players decline every week and they go backwards. As the older they get wiser, but the legs go. As the young players are coming through, they get more intelligent and wiser. So it's like people said. I remember somebody saying to me once, he was no good when he was 17. He's 21 now. And someone actually said that to me. Somebody high up in the game said, I remember when he was 17, he was no good then. No, it's 4 years later. That player's been coached and developed and thought about it. But this guy's still judging him from 4 years ago when he was
Yeah,
17.
a lot
Ridiculous.
happens in that time.
Of course it does. A month is a long time for a youth player. You
Yeah,
just imagine you're a coach and you're a player, you're a young kid of 14 who can't tackle and can't head, but you're a great footballer with the ball. In a month, some good coaches can make him tackle and make him head. Because remember, they're doing it day in, day out.
yeah. It's all about the coaching as well. Like you saying, we've seen many examples of that. But I wanted to ask you a bit more about IPSO now, Colin. So can you tell me a little bit more about IPSO and what it's about and what the business does?
Yeah, what IPSO does is we started off designing courses to teach people how to be a scout. Okay,
Yeah,
that's the first thing. Very simple. There's youth scouting and there's first team scouting. But when I started, I was just a first team scout. Yeah. So all I knew about was first team. So I designed a course on first team. How Ted trained me. Yeah. And when you look at that, it's how to look at a player, how to write reports on a player, and how to do opposition analysis. Because if you don't know how to do opposition analysis, you're going to get stuck in your journey as a scout. Because at some point, your chief scout, head of recruitment, is going to ask you to analyze the team. If you can't analyze the team, you're not going to stay in the job long. So it's
yeah,
not just about. So basically, half the course was about looking at players, and half the course was opposition analysis. But as we grew as a company and we started to evolve over, we've been going, and we're in 11th year now. We started to realize there's lots of other areas we can help people in scouting. So then we designed a course for youth scouting. So then I got a job working for a team and I started to go into youth scouting. Now, me coming down from first team, going to youth scouting, there's a massive difference. People think because you're a first team scout, oh, you can do youth scouting. No, you can't. You could do it to a certain degree, but you've got to change your thought process. You've got to look at a million different things because now you're looking at kids who are developing and changing week by week, day by day, not ready-made players at 27, 28. You're looking at a different animal now. You're looking for potential. So your thought process has to change. Everything has to change because looking at a youth player is completely different looking to a first team player. But so many people get that wrong. They think they can do both. No, you need to be trained because there's so many things. Yeah. So we designed the youth scouting course. Okay. So we designed that. And then online stuff coming in. And then we thought, well, we need an online course. Everybody's, especially when the pandemic kicked in, we were knackered, so we couldn't fly around the world and train people because we started off flying around the world, flew over to Poland and I've been all over the world teaching FAs and things like that. And then we did the opposition analysis course, which is level 4. So all of a sudden you've got level 1, 2, 3, 4. And we only have one. This is as the years develop. And going back to the pandemic, then we were struggling when that kicked in because we couldn't do a job. So I had to design stuff that were online. So we designed the workshops. So we did intros to the workshop, which one of them was bias, and you'd be surprised at how many people are biased and they don't even know it. I mean, people like me, even myself, even professional scouts can be biased. They have to look at themselves in the mirror. They have to reflect on what their thought process is. And sometimes they jump in with 2 feet too quickly, too many times. So bias was a big topic. So I designed a workshop on bias and it went down like an house on fire. Brilliant. People love it. So then I thought, well, why don't we do an introduction to the youth scouting course, an introduction to the first team scouting course, an introduction to the opposition analysis so they can have a taster. Instead of spending like £200 or £300 on a big course, 16 hours, come on a 2-hour one just to see if it's something that they like or the content, if it's all strong enough for them. Because There's lots of different education people out there now. Some are good, some are not. Some are strong, some are middle of the road, some are poor. So you got to make sure you get the right people. This is why we do workshops. We do free workshops so people can come and have a look at us. And if you don't like what we do, don't waste your money on IPSO. But if you do, come on. And it's a little bit of a try you buy. And I think we're the only people that actually do that. And it's working because we're honest and we're very open. We want you to see what you're going to buy. We don't, there's too many people jumping on the bandwagon now, making courses up just to make money. We're not in it just to make money. I'm very passionate about what I do, like Ted was. And I just took over Ted. I've turned into Ted now, and you're Danielson, and I'm trying to teach you. Yeah. And I'm trying to pass on down all the skills, but also keep it relevant with modern scouting, with new technology. There's hundreds of new stuff that comes in. Video scouting, you can zoom in now. I'm not going to turn my head up, turn away from that because it's valuable tools to help you. So again, as we've grown as a company, we've evolved all the courses 5 years ago are completely different to now. The courses 7 years are completely different to 5 years. Can you see? Because we're always updating them because the game's changing. Positions change. Centre backs could go in the box. Keepers come outside the area now. People looking for keepers better with their feet. They're looking for midfielders who can play 3 or 4 positions. So everything has to evolve. And this is what's good at IPSO. We keep on top of that.
I bet, yeah, because obviously there's so much changes in the game and that will affect scouting too. So I can imagine you have to. But like you said at the beginning, I believe it's still going from strength to strength. Can't get my words out. Like you said at the beginning, I believe it's still going very strongly as well at IPSO and still going really well today.
Yeah. I fly around the world. I've trained 6 or 7 FAs, national team selectors. And then I've gone on to universities, schools, colleges, even basic grassroots football teams. We've got something for everybody. But not only that, now we've branched out to different topics. We do player reports for people. If people have got a young boy or a young girl and they're not too sure if they're good enough to go for a trial or they don't know where they're at this moment in time, they want a professional, not an amateur, a professional to look at them. Then we've got that. They can send us videos or we can come out and watch them live if it's close by. And we can give them a written, super attention to detail report on where they are at this moment in time, because that's important.
I can imagine it is definitely. And I wanted to ask you one question as we approach the end, and that's when you think of scouting as a whole, the things you've done with IPSO, the things you've done with top teams that are playing in high leagues, what would be the one satisfaction that you get from scouting? Is it when you do spot a player that goes on to do massive things, a bit like the Jamie Vardy example that you gave earlier?
Yeah, there's two. There's 2 things that stand out. One's scouting and one's opposition analysis. So when you scout a player like a Jamie Vardy, and don't forget there's plenty of other ones. I remember Nick Powell at Crewe Alexander. And he went to Manchester United and lost his way. But what a talent, what a player. You know what I mean? And I saw him, and it was no brainer. We were never going to get him at Bolton. He was going to Man United, and he did end up at Man United. But 12 months, 16 months later, he got kicked out because his character and attitude wasn't right. He's now on the bench at Stockport, I believe. But when I saw him, he was a world beater. He was in between Teddy Sheringham and Gaza. He had everything at his feet. The world was his oyster. And sometimes character attitude kicks in big time. And he lost his way. So again, it's nice to see a player that you've scouted and they go on to bigger and better things. But even scouts as experienced as me can get it wrong. But I'm going to reword that. You don't actually get it wrong. You do your job to the detail that should be done, but the player changes. Yeah. And sometimes you can't see it, right? And it's impossible to see. I don't care who says it, because I'll give you an example. Nick Powell, I would have put my house, my mortgage, everything that he was going to be the next superstar. He was that good, right? And I looked at his character. I looked at his play. He would love it. I'd have had him as a son. He was brilliant. But when he goes to Manchester United and money kicks in and he's on big money and money's falling out his pockets and you get him with the wrong crowd, it changes you. And then I remember going to see him at Man United in the reserves, the 21s. and he was a shadow of himself. You could see his personality had changed, and it's all down to money. You've only got to look at Dele Alli. Dele
Yeah,
Alli went from
good
MK
example.
Dons to Spurs, bang, brilliant. All of a sudden, when money's in his pockets, attitude changes, character changes. What a disaster! And then Paul Pogba, I saw Pogba at United coming through. Unbelievable player. You knew he was going to make it. It's only because I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think the agent wanted him to be playing week in, week out for the first team. And Ferguson said, no chance, it's not going to work. So they shipped him out and they took him to Juventus. And he went on to be a superstar at Juventus because he had the right character, personality, everything was perfect about the player. And he was the Paul Pogba that we all know was a world class player at the time. But then he comes back to United and his character kicks in. That's not the scout's fault. You can't see that. You can't have
No.
inklings that character's changing. And it's a big part, reading body language, reading personality, reading character reference. And this has to go in the report. It's not just about football. People don't get that. People don't understand that. Most people who come on our courses, I can scout, and then they come on our level 3 course or level 4 course, and they struggle. They struggle because they're coming. We're doing it professionally. We're doing it proper, but they've never seen this. And they've only done the basics of an FA level 1 course, a basic scouting course, which are not good enough if you want to learn the job properly and get challenged like us.
I bet that is a big thing sometimes what happens with the player as well. Obviously you've scouted them and done your job, so
Yeah.
it's down to them really to prove their worth after
The
that.
only thing you can do if you're a good scout is be ready to change your opinion. Remember, you can
Yeah,
change your opinion anytime. So I'll give you an example. Don't forget, going back to Nick Powell, I thought he was going to be the next superstar, but I was big enough when I saw him playing in the under-21s to turn around and say, he's changed. He's not going to make it. You've got to say, no, he's not the player that I would have recommended. I would not have
yeah.
recommended him because of his character, his personality. And it's a shame, but it happens, you know.
I can imagine, but I guess it comes with the highs and lows of the game.
There's lots of highs, there's lots of lows. People don't see it when a scout goes to a freezing, rainy day and the wind's hitting you at Blackpool and you're shivering,
Yeah.
and you're trying to watch the game. And that's a nightmare. And sometimes it can be too hot and you're at the game. You need your sunglasses on, and there's loads of awkward things. I've been to situations. I remember Chef Wednesday. That you usually get put in the director's box, usually, because you're VIP. You don't want fans around you because you're doing your job. But I remember going to Chef Wednesday and they played Sheffield United. And for some reason, Chef Wednesday put all the ex-players in the director's box. No, nothing wrong with that. What they didn't realise is they shoved us to the side. And when we're in the side with all the Chef Wednesday fans, they could see what we were writing, taking reports, and the fans didn't like it because they'd never seen scouts before. And they would start abusing us and stuff. And there was about 30 scouts who actually got up and had to leave before it got into trouble, with fisticuffs and stuff like that. Because what do you do? Why are you looking at our team, giving it all this? Well, you don't get that in the director's box because
Just
you
doing
do it
your job.
just doing your job. Could you imagine if I'd have been a Leeds United fan with a Leeds tie on and been shoved to the left in with all the Chef Wednesday fans? I could have
I
got
know.
killed.
I know. Yeah.
Mm.
Just doesn't bear thinking about really, does
No, it
it?
doesn't. It doesn't. But they're just, listen, I've got a million stories. I'm very good at remembering stories, and stories are super important because when you're on a course, you want to listen to the scouts' experience.
Yeah.
And I've been on many, many courses, other scouts, other coaches, and things like that. And one of my pet hates is when I see a guy, ex player, just for let's just use an ex player, ex manager, it doesn't matter, and they come on and it's a scouting seminar, and they just talk about their careers, and they don't teach you anything about scouting. And I look at that, and I've seen this hundreds of times. Oh, let's get it's a big name. He comes on. You go, you think, oh, this is great, big celebrity names, and they just talk about their careers. They don't teach you anything about scouting, and it's meant to be a scouting and an analysis seminar, and you don't learn anything. I'm the opposite. When people come on our workshops or courses, I just quickly fire through my CV, 30 seconds, and then I get straight into teaching them how to scout. That's
Yeah.
what you're paying your money for, to learn. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you've enjoyed an incredible career, Colin, and I'm sure there's many more great years ahead with bringing on the new generation too. But we always finish these episodes by asking, and I'm quite looking forward to your answer of this question. Our final question is if you could give yourself, a teenage Colin Chambers, one piece of advice, knowing all of the stuff you know now and things that you didn't know back then, what would it be?
When you're listening to other scouts and other people in the game, take them with a pinch of salt.
Really?
Yeah. Because I remember my first early games, man, this is a true story. And there were 10 scouts. There were 10 scouts there. And Ted said this to me. He said, look at them 10 scouts. He said, I'm going to give you the biggest tip of your career in scouting. I said, go on. He said, you see them 7. He pointed 7. He said, don't listen to a word they say. Don't listen to a word. If you get in conversation with them when you're having a coffee, a sandwich in the room that you get allocated to, don't listen to them. Why? Because they're playing at it. The charlatans. And there's a lot of them out there. He said, but you see those 3 there? Listen to every word they said. You know why? They're proper scouts. They're professionals. And if you're going to learn, you need to listen to the right people, because it's very easy to get stuck with the wrong people, learn the wrong things, and you're going to trip up. So what you need is to make sure that the people who's giving you the tips are credible. Because if you get the wrong information, you're going to go backwards very, very quickly and you're going to fail. And nobody wants that. And this is why, we've designed the courses that we've designed. And we get many people coming on our courses going, wow, this is really different to such and such a body's course. I said, yeah, because it's real, because we're teaching you properly. And they go, yeah, well, why has nobody showed us this? And we get this all the time because we want to do it properly. And, we're very, like I said to you, we're very, very passionate. And there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things, and you've only got to look at some of these technical directors now. Most technical directors are trained and good ones, but sometimes they just get given a technical director's role. They've just finished a playing career. They've not scouted. They've not coached. They've not done anything. And they've just gone and got a technical director's job. And these guys are signing players off. I think that's the craziest thing I've ever seen in football.
Mm.
You need properly, highly skilled scouts who know what they're talking about to sign that player off, not a technical director who's just finished his career, just done a fancy course just to have a certificate that says he's a technical director. But the bottom line is it comes back to the technical director to sign it. And that's a big thing in football. And I think, you've only got to look at what's happened at Man United. They got Dan Ashworth in, then they worked out he wasn't doing his job or he wasn't as strong as what they thought. I'm not 100% sure. He can't quote me on that. And they got rid of him. So that tells you a lot of things going wrong behind the scenes. People need credibility. And when you're getting people to work for you as a chief scout, a technical director, you need to look at the past records. And they haven't got a past record, then don't hire them. It's as simple as that. But people do. People do because of the names and where they've been. I remember a technical director. Again, I'm not going to name clubs. And he came from the FA. And he went to a club. And he was the technical director of this club. He was the most, are you ready? Unknowledgeable football person I've ever met in my life. I've seen better fans with more knowledge.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, this guy's technical director. It's just so wrong. I'm not here to slag technical directors. I'm not. It's just the policies how sometimes people get jobs.
I think sometimes as well it can be because
It's
of
just
the
a bit
name
strange.
too.
You know what I mean? And I just think, we're not just talking technical directors. You're talking chief scouts. You're talking heads of recruitments. You're talking lots of different roles. They need to be vetted and they need to be looked at a little bit deeper. And I'll tell you this: how many scouts have you seen get sacked? Very few. Think about that. How many coaches have you seen get sacked? Very few. They only change coaches when a new manager comes in. They don't sack them. They don't sack the scouts. But hang on a minute. If you're working as a postman and you were a bad postman and not delivering letters, you get sacked. Agreed?
Yeah.
I don't think, what I would do if I got involved with the club again, I would make sure I would be looking at all my scouts' reports. I'd be looking at who they've recommended, who they've not recommended, and I'd work out to see are they doing the job properly? But it doesn't happen. I'd love to see it happen. And if they did, that club would be 10 times better because you're only as good as your scouts. Your scouts are the first protocol. They're the ones who fetch his players into the club. They've got to be looked at professionally. They've got to be assessed professionally and analysed professionally.
It's an important role it is, and I'd like to thank you for coming on and sharing the role and your journey as a scout today, Colin. It's been great chatting with you and hearing your story, and thanks so much for joining us again.
No problem. Anytime.